Right, good evening everyone. It's just fractionally past 7:15, so I think we'll make a start. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Local Plan Subcommittee, 15th of August. Welcome to committee members, officers, those in the public gallery. Nice to see a few people here, and anyone watching via the Council's YouTube channel. I'd also just like to extend a welcome to Sarah Ashton, our new Head of Planning. I think we can still call you new, just about. I know many of you have met Sarah, but some haven't, so very nice to have you here with us this evening. I'll just start with apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Parker, who's being substituted this evening by Councillor Holland. I don't have any other apologies. Are we expecting Councillor Walsh? Do we? No, right, okay. Oh, he is, okay. Yes, all right, okay. Otherwise, everyone else is here, which is good. Can I ask for declarations of interest, please, to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members, please. Any one at all? No? Right. Thank you, members. Before I move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, I have a statement I'm going to make, if you will just indulge me. So, as members will recall, in March 2025, 2024, that should be, not 2025, getting ahead of myself, the Local Plan Subcommittee took the decision to commence work on a review and a refresh of the local plan, given the uncertainty around potential changes to the existing plan-making system. Now, at that time, we acknowledged that the timescale would be tight, with a lot of work involved for both officers and members to meet the deadline of submitting a refreshed local plan to the Planning Inspectorate by the 30th of June 2025. Therefore, this committee did note that there might be potential for a further review of the timetable if and when a new local plan system, guidance and transitional arrangements were released by the government. Councillors will be aware of the recent announcements from the new Labour government around proposed reforms to the planning system, which are now being consulted on. There will be a verbal report at the end of this meeting which covers the proposed changes in more detail. However, key headlines include a new standard method, which is likely to increase our housing target, as well as bringing back the 5-year housing land supply requirement, together with the return of the 5% buffer. In addition, we now have details of the transitional arrangements for the new local plan system within this consultation, and confirmation that the government are giving an extended period for submitting local plans under the current system until December 2026. This new standard method, together with a new deadline for local plan submissions being extended to December 26, is something officers are already considering, and I am in discussion with officers regarding a revised timetable. And once the implications have been thought through, a new revised timetable for the local plan will be presented to the committee. I would just at this point like to take the opportunity to extend my thanks now to Sarah and Alan in particular, because they've been working at speed to finalise the timetable. My thanks to them. In terms of the work that's been undertaken since March 2024, officers have advised that the technical work we have commissioned on our evidence base can be amended to take into account a higher housing target if necessary, and this includes the strategic housing market assessment, which should be completed this autumn, and can set a housing target for Braintree District, taking into account both the existing standard method and the proposed standard method. Now, this means that nothing the team has worked on or is working on will be lost. It's just worth saying, as members, those who've been involved with the local plan process previously will know there is quite a long list of evidence-based documents to produce in order to support a local plan, and consultants and officers are working on these now, and that work will continue, and it will stand us in good stead going forward. In terms of the informal engagement, which closes tomorrow, I would like to thank everyone who's already responded to this, and in particular those parish councils who I know have made every effort to engage in a short period of time. I know that it's helpful for officers to have this feedback at this early stage, which has been a community engagement exercise. It's not a formal consultation. It was our way of trying to engage and give parish councils the opportunity to have an early say on their thoughts for the sites submitted. I am aware of great concerns expressed by some parish councils at the number of sites submitted and homes proposed, and just to repeat the assurance we've already given, there is a long way to go yet before any decisions are made, but we do very much value the efforts that parish councils, who don't always meet regularly every month, but the efforts they've gone to submit their comments. Within a revised local plan timetable, there will be other opportunities for further engagement and discussions, as well as formal consultations about the local plan. So plenty of opportunity still over the next few months for anybody to submit their comments. Given the need to work through the proposed reforms and the implications for Braintree District on our local plan, I have asked for the 2nd of September meeting to be cancelled, and I'm flagging that now because it's less than 3 weeks away. So I think for, to help members with their diaries, I wanted to say that this evening. The 16th of September meeting will take place, but this will be to allow for a discussion on the MPPF consultation response to the government's planned reforms and a revised local plan timetable. And following that, a revised schedule of the local plan subcommittee meetings will be put in place, and I will ensure with officers that we get that out as soon as possible. There will also be a further briefing on planning and the local plan at the members' evening on the 18th of September, which should have been in members' diaries for a little while now. That concludes my statement, members. I would like to seek the support of the subcommittee for my proposals. Thank you. Councillor Butland.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I suppose we should be grateful to the government for the extension of the time to December 26, because that means now that we are able to take it at a slower pace, not a snail pace, but a slower pace, which will certainly enable not just parish councils, but members of the public, etc., to be more fully engaged. And it will give us time as a committee to be able to take things forward, particularly around the policies and also what the larger housing numbers will mean for us before we actually start talking about sites and that sort of thing, which is usually what creates most interest or concern that way. So I fully support the suggestion that you are putting forward to us, that we take it to that, and I look forward to the meeting on the 16th. Hopefully by that time we'll have a bit more notice. There's the revised MPPF as well, which none of us know exactly what is going to be in there. So I very much support what you're suggesting we do as a committee. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Councillor Cunningham, I think you were next, and then Councillor Abbott.
Thank you very much. And again, I echo Councillor Butland's words in welcoming this extension, which allows this authority to proceed with its refresh of a local plan, not a new local plan, a refresh of the local plan, and honouring its quite rightful commitment to the residents of the district Braintree to ensure communities continue to be best served and protected by having the comfort and the planning overarching strategic framework of a local plan agreed that can be extended. And I think that's a very important thing. A lot has changed in the last 6 weeks with the new government in terms of planning. Some high ambition, some big numbers announced, and a determination to get on with it. What I'm concerned about is everything's changed, yet in some ways nothing has changed, because I still feel the framework of planning is suited far too much towards the development sector as opposed to communities and local government. And I make this point in relation to our local plan refresh, and therefore the extension of the timeline and the longer time period that we're now going to be working towards, because it gives us all a greater assurance that the work around the numbers can be done properly, thoroughly, and beyond reproach. And when that work is done, it will be incumbent upon all members of this local authority, and provided that we can have the strong corporate message, because it's the council's local plan, it's not a political local plan, it's the council's local plan, ensuring we have the right amount of work and depth of work done on the numbers so we can explain to the public the demands upon the local plan process of this council in allocating sites. And what I mean by that, not just the independently assessed housing need, but actually matters relating to housing deliverability, the challenges with housing deliverability. And that's frankly where I would have liked at this stage, and I'm sure I'm not alone, to see government policy go a little bit further in ensuring that when you get to those further stages of the process, that developers are held to account to deliver once permission is granted. Because that's the problem where we've been fundamentally let down in this district. Matters of 5-year housing supply. This development control function of this authority can churn out planning applications like there's no tomorrow. Yet if developers don't get on and do it, then we are in then we've got difficulties. And those are considerations I think we will have to take into account when it comes to looking at the obvious merits of larger sites versus small sites, etc., etc. And I think, again, I repeat the point, it's incumbent upon members to behave responsibly in communicating those challenges around the numbers. Because let's be brutally honest, through the last local plan process, that didn't always happen. There were some outrageous sort of suggestions that somehow that this authority was putting an unnecessarily high number into the local plan, just for reasons of its own whim, really, or for its own political volition. So when we get to that stage, I think we look forward to a far more constructive approach than we may have had in previous years, but hopefully reassured by having that additional time to make sure that the work has been done properly and as thoroughly as possible, because I think we owe the district no less than that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Yes, I mean, we already have an indication of the higher housing number that we are going to be expected to produce, and we're not here to discuss that or tonight or site specifically, but we do need to be realistic about that, and it is going to be how we explain that message particularly to parish councils and to residents, and to how we achieve that number and the best outcome. Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just very briefly in response to that, because I know what Councillor Cunningham was trying to do. Being lectured to in a democracy about what we can and can't say, and being told we have to behave corporately is very unlikely to garner support and empathy from those of us who are elected to represent our communities. I hope we're not going to go down the same route as the last local plan, where anybody who had a contrary view is name-called and put into a box. That's all I'll say on that. My questions. I'm trying to assimilate all you said, Madam Chairman. So we're looking at a new timetable. So we're not going to be considering the sift of the call for sites in those first 2 dates. Apologies if I missed it. What about the second 2 dates of the 24th of September and October the 2nd? Or are we going for a completely different sifting dates beyond those? That's my first question. Related to that, can the parishes be informed ASAP about this position? Because obviously some of them will be thinking, well, I said it last night at Cressing, you need to get your reps lined up for these meetings. And in general, can we have the new dates communicated as soon as possible, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Abbott. I flagged up the first 2 dates only because they are a very short time away, in particular the 2nd of September, which has been cancelled. We're keeping the second date, 16th of September, because we do need to discuss our response to the proposed MPPF reforms. As far as the later dates are concerned, and together with informing parish councils, we will get the revised timetable out quickly, as soon as possible. I'm conscious of the fact that parish councils need to know in particular to schedule their discussions around their meetings and so on. So we will get that information out. I say officers are working, we've concentrated this week on those first couple of meetings and getting this initial information out, particularly because the deadline for submission of comments is tomorrow. But I will make sure that those dates come out, not just for the benefit of this committee, but for all members and the parish councils.
If I may come back, that was another question I meant to ask. Given this, is there any possibility legally we could extend the consultation deadline?
Can I just ask officers for a bit of input on that, please?
Yeah, I think we can safely say that the consultation deadline, whilst it is fixed, we would be flexible in terms of any parish councils needing a little bit of extra time. The pressure with the cancellation of meetings in September, the pressure is no longer there for parish councils to get comments in time for a report that will be published. So there is some. They will have a little bit more time if they need it. We have received, I think so far, about 15 to 20 parish council responses already. But if there's a few more that take a little bit longer to come in, that shouldn't be a problem from our perspective.
Can that be communicated as well?
Yes. Yes, we'll make sure that goes out as well. Councillor Walsh was next, and then Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was purely going to ask a planning question, but given some of the comments made earlier on, I would like to add one short phrase. Councillor Cunningham said he wasn't going to make political statements. His temperance lasted a couple of seconds. I want to deal with the planning matters at hand, though, and I thank you for the statement. It's interesting. In terms of this meeting, is it something to note, or is it something that we're being asked to agree? And then the second part, I think it's very interesting, and I welcome much of what you said, Councillor Spray, as chair. And it's a development of what Councillor Abbott said, and obviously we haven't conferred because this is the first we've heard of it. When will we get the new timetable beyond the first two meetings, and will the approach follow the same, and forgive me for going into planning jargon, will it follow the same sort of settlement hierarchy approach, you know, villages, key service villages, small towns, etc.? I think it would be good for our communities, residents and community groups to have a bit of a heads up on that.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I'm not taking a vote on this statement this evening. I'm just asking for support from the committee and comments, and it's for noting. It's not for a vote. And as far as the settlement hierarchy is concerned, yeah, I think we will stick to the, I think, Alan, will stick to the original.
I believe so. We do, as it is a local plan review, we will obviously have to review the hierarchy as it currently is. Members will obviously have the opportunity to make a decision at a later date as to whether or not that is an appropriate hierarchy, or whether there needs to be amendments made as a result of change. If a village circumstances have changed, for example, if it's lost some key services that means it's no longer able to support day-to-day functions, then it may go down a tier. If it's gained something, it could go up a tier. We'll be very much guided by the parish councils and their responses on this sort of issue. But as I say, one of the first meetings will be to look at the settlement hierarchy and the policies associated with that.
Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it's important that we give as much time as we possibly can, especially to parish councils, because a lot of parish councils don't even meet in August, and a lot of them don't have shorter meetings. They have longer gaps between the meetings because they're smaller parish councils. But the most important thing is that I think we should give as much time as possible to everyone to be able to comment on this, because what we was working on through no fault of the council was a very short timeline, and that concerned me greatly. That people, one, understood it, what we was doing. It wasn't a new plan, it was only a refresh. And secondly, that they had enough time, given that it's holiday periods and everything like that as well. So it was important that the public are given, our public are given as much time as possible to speak on it, basically, and say their feelings. because it's apparent, not obvious already, that many parishes are taking a lot of flack because of what's been proposed and what's the call for sites. And obviously it's concerned an awful lot of people within the Braintree district, and quite rightly so. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bowles. I absolutely agree, and I would say one of the advantages of the government's new deadline for us is it does allow more time for discussion and consultation, and I know certainly in my own ward there's a lot of concern about some of the sites that have been submitted, so it's important that everybody has a chance to have their say. Councillor Butland, I think you wanted to come back on something. Councillor Bowers? Yeah, no, right.
Can I just be clear in my own mind then? So, following this meeting, we could get something out which would say the timetable's being looked at, and therefore don't panic about the closing date of the 16th of August. But we won't be able to give the revised dates until this committee has determined the outcome of whatever paper comes to us on the big fly. Whatever comes to us on the 16th of September meeting. So I think we probably need two bits of communication. One now to say there will be a change, and I suspect it might need to be quite a significant change in the timetable. And then we will have a paper coming to us on the 16th with recommendations as to how that should be, which will then go out with more information. I don't think we can go out at the moment and say, you know, what the dates are, because we will want to know as a committee how we're planning through, really, I suppose, between now and whatever our end date may be in 2026, for example.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we will make sure that we get the message out pretty much immediately to the parish councils that they don't need to worry and rush too much about the deadline, which I think is 5 p.m. tomorrow for comments. We can be flexible on that. And then the revised timetable for the remainder of the meetings, other than the 16th, which is now going to have a different agenda. But other than that, we will get the revised timetable out as soon as we can after that. All right, yeah. Councillor Bowes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'd like to welcome the statement and the development that you've announced tonight. I think it's the best thing to do for this refresh of the local plan. Like has also been mentioned tonight, I think it's very important that communities, parish councils, members have got that extra time to have considered opinions and chance of an understanding, because I know not just from parish council's point of view, which with the pressure timetable, but also sort of many comments on social media of residents not understanding, and the seemingly sort of rush timetable as well hasn't sort of helped in that. So I think it's very welcomed for the community involvement in this, and welcomed a less pressured timetable. I appreciate the slower pace, which is going to be good for us, obviously dependent on what the timetable that comes back before this committee. But I think one of the things you also mentioned, which is very key, that the policy work will continue, and that's as key as anything in regards the local plan and protecting the district, and also key to what's not like sites coming forward, but also with planning committee and that thing going forward, that we do have the right applications that end up sort of coming to fruition, and I feel having that extra time can only strengthen that piece of work. And lastly, I think following on from the other comments, I think the communication piece is key to not just but residents, members and parish councils, because at the end of the day, this is not this committee's local plan. You know, it's not this council that it's technically local plan. It's everyone's local plan. It's the local plan for the district. So it's very important that everyone has the right communication in regards to what's happening from your statement tonight, but also the slower pace and hopefully a length in the timetable will be, I would like to think, will be very welcome to give everyone that opportunity to give that input. So I welcome everything that you said tonight. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowles. I agree. I mean, the evidence-based work, there is quite a long list We already have consultants started work. Some started work quite a few weeks ago, some are just about to start work, and that will just carry on in the background and we'll be there for us going forward. With regards to comms, there will be an all-member email going out tomorrow based on my statement with some added bits from Sarah, I think. So that will be going out tomorrow, and we will make sure that this information is communicated to parish councils and to residents as well. I agree, and I absolutely understand the importance of letting everyone know the changes. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Any comments at all? Anything officers want to add at this stage? No. Dominic, yeah.
Just to give comfort on communications, we already have a press release drafted, ready to go out to give public notification as well of essentially what has been statemented tonight, and the parish council and town council comms is already drafted and ready to go. So we're ready to help communicate that tomorrow.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you very much. And can I, to the Corporate Director for clarifying that, can I just check that's appropriate Facebook and X communication as well?
Yes.
Yes, it'll be on all social
Yeah.
media channels as well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I have particularly asked that it be suitable, or there be a version for Facebook and X.
Because just to clarify, I'm certainly not of the view that all members have to behave corporately. That's not what I said in response to Councillor Abbott, but it's important that the corporate message gets out there and can be shared appropriately.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. All right. Oh, yes. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to say that yes, it's good that we've got a bigger timescale to give people time to properly consult with their communities and to make sure that the housing across the district is done very well. But I'm also mindful that it is so desperately needed across the district, so nothing needs to, nothing should be delayed. It's good that we've got more time, but that has to be balanced with the terrible need that we've got for housing across the district, and also now that we've got our new government, who will also be having that as a very high priority, we will be working alongside the government to ensure that it's the right housing in our district for the people that desperately need it, and also it will have the infrastructure to go with it so that the whole community will benefit from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Well, I agree, the housing is very much needed. This isn't a pause, it isn't a stop, very far from it. It is simply that we have been given some extra time. And actually, when you consider the amount of work to be done to produce a refreshed local plan, yes, it's a bit of extra time. It's still, there's going to be more than enough to do, believe me. So it just allows for a little bit more consultation, a bit less of a rush for everyone to get their comments back. But absolutely take your point that we need to crack on with producing homes, and we will certainly not delay in doing that. Thank you. All right. No more comments on that. Well, thank you very much for your indulgence with that, members, and I hope it's been helpful. I'll now move on to item 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting. This was on 7th of March. Minutes have been distributed. If there are no comments or alterations, could I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Butland. Seconder, Councillor Ritchie. All those in agreement that minutes be approved for those who were here? Thank you. Thank you, members. I'll just sign those. Right, public question time. We do have a speaker this evening, Councillor Simon Last from Great Maplestead Parish Council, who is here to make a statement. Councillor Last, welcome this evening. If you'd like to come forward and put your microphone on.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me just a few moments to speak.
Right.
I'll keep this brief because fully understanding that we're very early on into the local refresh. I represent Great Maplestead. You may know that we're approximately 350 residents, 160 households, and we're currently designated as a Tier 3 settlement. With this call for sites, we've had two proposals put forward, which together amount to approximately 2 acres in area, and applying your metric on this could potentially accommodate up to 50 houses, which is large for a settlement of our size, we feel. We're very concerned about the scale of these proposals and question the sustainability of any developments of this size. We've already had concerns voiced by residents. We had quite a good turnout at a public meeting last night, in fact, that view the proposals as probably disproportionate for a village of our size, given our lack of amenities. So the question is a simple one, and I know it's early in the process. Obviously, I acknowledge the demand for housing in Braintree District Council is high. I think possibly everybody has to do their bit to try and help this situation, and probably targets are going to increase. So my question is, with the pressure to increase housing starts, will certain fundamental criteria, do you anticipate fundamental criteria in the planning process changing going forward? Possibly a difficult question to answer. But for us, the key criteria is probably sustainability. With the pressure on housing, do you anticipate a softening in sustainability as a prime example, or other criteria going forward? And that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Lars. I'll ask Officer perhaps to comment, but my understanding and actually my hope is that we would not be relaxing our sustainability requirements or our need for infrastructure, which has always been very important. And I think it's fair to say that this local authority strives to obtain as much infrastructure as we can on all developments. I would not really want to see that being relaxed in any way. Obviously, yes, we will have housing targets we need to meet, but I don't think that means that we have to lose sight of sustainability. I don't know, Alan, would you like to add anything to that?
Just to say that obviously the sustainability criteria used will generally be the same. Looking at the emerging MPPF, the main point to pick up on, I think, is there is a lot of talk in there about increasing densities. The current MPPF sort of restricts those densities to what is in an existing area, but this is moving away to more of a higher density proposals, particularly within what he calls the more sustainable areas. So I think there's a suggestion that towns and sustainable areas with good transport links, such as a good rail, road, bus connection, that sort of thing, would be expected to have a higher level of density than they may previously have been used to. But I certainly don't think that will be the case in a village like Great Maplestead. It is a rather small village, and it does have very limited services, which is reflected in its rating as a Tier 3 village, which is no insult to the village itself. It's just how we categorise them when we're looking at development. So the other larger villages, key service village, main towns, would most likely be the more of a priority for development proposals in the local plan moving forward, rather than these smaller villages.
Thank you very much. So I hope, Councillor, that gives you some comfort. We
That's very helpful. Thanks for your time.
We're not taking our eye off the ball.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or get on with your evening. Thank you. Okay. Right, members. Agenda item 5, local plan review, which is the Planning Advisory Service Toolkits, parts 1 and 2. Alan, I think you're presenting this, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Councillor. Right. So as part of the local plan review, Officer officers have conducted a review of local plan policies. This is in line with guidance provided by the Planning and Advisory Services. The Planning Advisory Services are funded by government, and what they do is they provide support to councils on a number of issues, including getting local plans up to date, running planning events, and overall improving decision making. To help update the local plan, PAS produced a toolkit which authorities can use to go through their existing plan. The subject of this report is a Part 1 and Part 2 toolkit. The Part 1 toolkit is a local plan review assessment, and Part 2 looks at the local plan form and content. Two other parts look at local plan process requirements and soundness and quality. Those will be assessed as we are going through the local plan process in future, and obviously we'll be reviewing the Part 1 and Part 2 toolkit as well once we have certainty on what the new MPPF will look like. Part 1 shows that the policies in the adopted plan are not particularly reflective of certain aspects of the current MPPF. It shouldn't really come as a surprise, as the local plan was produced under the requirements of the 2012 MPPF. It did identify a number of areas of concern, including housing, primarily due to the requirements for standard methodology, design considerations, biodiversity, and transport, things like that. The Part 2 toolkit shows the local plan performs well in most areas and is generally compatible with the current MPPF. But again, there are some areas that will need updating, particularly the definition or expanded definition of affordable housing, and the need to consider biodiversity net gain and local nature recovery strategies. The detailed tables are available from page 10 of the report, at Appendix 1, and I think the recommendation is to note the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Members, anybody? Any comments? I think what it does demonstrate, as Alan said, is that we do have some work to do to bring our policies up to speed, which will form part of the work that's being carried out with the refresh of the local plan at the moment on our evidence base and policies. So it's obviously a good opportunity to do that. Anybody, any comments? Everybody happy with that? Right. In that case, the recommendation, members, is to note the outcomes of Toolkit Part 1, Local Plan Review Assessment, and Toolkit Part 2, Local Plan Form and Content Checklist. Could I have somebody to move and second move? Councillor Bowles-Flint. Second, Councillor Monday. And a show of hands, please, for those in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Right, move on to item 6, which is the Development Boundary Review Methodology. Alan, again.
Thank you very much.
It's all about you.
It is, yes. we'll hear from Sarah later. So. Okay, so the Development Boundary Review Methodology is a local plan evidence-based document. What it does is it sets out how the local authority assesses its existing development boundaries. Development boundaries are a designation in the local plan and generally differentiate where development will more likely be acceptable. So sites within a development boundary have a general presumption in favour of development, whereas sites outside of them are more restrictive and generally reserved for sort of countryside uses, recreation, that sort of thing. It's really important that the development boundaries are appropriately drawn and follow sensible boundaries. The previous document was originally adopted in 2015. As such, it needs updating as we are now reviewing the plan, and there's some out-of-date references in there that have been changed. The main change to the proposed document includes adding reference to self and custom build, reference to the prevention of ribbon development, and increased threshold for the definition of a hamlet from 10 dwellings to 20 dwellings. No specific requirement is required for this document. However, when we go out to more formal stages of consultation, the evidence base is subject to comment. So that would be during our Regulation 18 and Regulation 19 consultations. So the proposed document is Appendix 1 of the report. And any questions?
Thank you, Alan. Right. Members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I read through this carefully, and I just wanted to highlight one point really, which is that listed buildings with important landscape settings on the edge of built-up areas should be excluded from development boundaries. In Rivenall we have a Grade 2 listed school and a Grade 1 listed church with a scheduled ancient monument around it, and it is indeed, despite those two buildings being pivotal in the community, they are outside the development boundary of the village. So I presume that's going to remain the case based on these criteria. But it just struck me that it's an interesting point that you can have such important buildings, but because of their status, they're outside the village boundary.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Yes, Alan.
Yes, we generally try and avoid extending development boundaries to include large curtilages of buildings. We try and draw them so they contain the built form. If you start including backland, gardens, you might end up with inappropriate backland development. But if in the case of a listed building, the criteria for getting permission for those is very tight anyway, so you have to take into consideration the curtilage setting, all that sort of thing. So it would be quite difficult, even if it was in the development boundary, to get permission, but not impossible. But yes, the document does, when we do look at gardens and settings and things like that, we officers will make an assessment as to whether or not it is appropriate to include that garden, and we will draw that line appropriately. All the inset maps for all the villages and towns will be reviewed, and those development boundaries will be checked again. We did a similar exercise during the previous round of local plan work, and we think we got everything last time, but obviously some sites have now gained planning permission, and we would need to look at those to see whether or not the boundaries are appropriately drawn, particularly where they've had some landscaping buffers, that sort of thing, included as part of the permissions. So some boundaries may contract a little just to reflect where actual development occurred, because the local plan only allocates a site and it will colour in a usually orange blob, and it's up to the planning application process to determine where the houses will be on that site, where the landscaping would be. So we'd go back, we'd have a look at that site, and we would adjust the boundary accordingly.
Thank you. Good. Yep. Councillor Cunningham.
Sorry, just a very straightforward question, if I may, and thank you, Alan, for presenting that. Very good document, very technical document. But just so I understand, and so all our friends who might be watching, and when we report back to our communities, the benefit of this policy is that it does give planning committees and members, planning officers, that greater resilience in terms of protecting particular communities from development outside what they consider to be their village, and protecting the countryside primarily, really. Is that right?
Yeah, Alan?
That's primarily right. It's protecting the countryside, protecting the setting of existing villages, things like that. So we do have to review our local plan every 5 years, so we will still have to go through this exercise every time we do that. But if a local plan is developing as expected, then it should give local people a degree of comfort as to where development should be taking place, all things considered, such as whether our 5-year supply situation continues, and things like that. But our aim is to make sure we've drawn appropriate boundaries which will allow development to take place where necessary, because that is how you allocate a site. Is you'll look at a site, you will move the development boundary if it is appropriate to do so, and you will give it an allocation. In some cases, it may be appropriate to move a boundary to enable a small level of development to take place, say, because we generally only allocate sites of 10 plus or more, but that will be highlighted to members when we take reports to committee, so they'll know where those adjustments will be taking place.
Thank you.
Okay, good. No other comments on that? Right. Members, the recommendation point 2.1 is that the development boundary review methodology appendix 1 is amended and updated. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Move Councillor Ritchie, second Councillor Cunningham, and a show of hands please. Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, so we move on to agenda item 7, which is the statement of community involvement 2024. Alan.
Thank you very much. So the council statement of community involvement sets out how the council will consult on its local plan and planning applications. Normally a SCI is updated every 5 years. However, it is good practice to update them as and when required. So as the council is starting production of a new local plan, it's therefore a good idea to update the contents of this document. The main changes proposed are to update the background information on the local plan, update references to the National Planning Policy Framework, and set out slightly more detailed information on the use of social media. The council has previously consulted on changes to the SCI, and we're proposing to do so again, although there is no and there's nothing in guidance that says we have to, but as we always have previously consulted on the document, we will do so again. That will be a 6-week consultation, hopefully launching in the next week or two, and the comments received during that consultation will be fed back to the local plan subcommittee, and it will be the local plan subcommittee who decides whether or not they want to incorporate any changes into the final draft of the document. And the draft SCI is on page 74 of the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Alan. Members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to propose a small change, whether that's, officers could advise whether that's taken now or through the consultation process, whatever's best. On paragraph 815, site notices, it says that site notices should be displayed on a telegraph pole, street light or fence wall gate. But in actual fact, practice is also to include highway sign poles where it's appropriate to do so. And in fact, I checked tonight, there's 2 planning notices at the bottom of this road on highway sign poles. I had experience of a sign being inappropriately placed, which caused friction when it was put too far away from the host property, when an appropriate highway sign pole could be used. So would it be possible to add that as another criteria, please?
Can I just check, Councillor Abbott, sorry, what point number was that?
815.
Oh, 815. Right, okay. Thank you. Yes, Alan,
Yeah,
sorry.
we'd be happy to include that alteration prior to
Because
consultation.
it's in effect what the council is doing already.
Yes, if we could.
And as I say, if anyone wants to look, there's an example just down the bottom of the road here.
That's perfect.
Okay. All right, fine, yep, we'll do that. Anyone else? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is purely an information point, and I may have missed something in the document, but Alan Masso was saying this consultation is 6 weeks. It's not formally required. Does this part of the process also include the scoping and issues element, and is that advised or required? Can you just unpack that a little? Because there's been some comment in the community, and I think some correspondence with the Chief Exec.
I can do that. The 6 week I'm referring to is purely for the statement of community involvement. When somebody is talking about issues and scoping consultation, they're actually referring to essentially a first round of Regulation 18 consultation. And normally a local, or a lot of the time, a local authority will do a Regulation 18 consultation, but call it an issues and scoping consultation, and then they'll do another Regulation 18 consultation, which is identified as the formal Regulation 18 consultation, then going on to Regulation 19. The SCI makes reference to the council being able to determine how it does its early engagement, because the guidance on SCI says that the council is up to the councils as to how they conduct that early engagement, but a lot of councils do an issues and scoping to start with, but it is down to the individual local authorities as to what that early engagement would look like.
Just for clarity, thank you very much. But it would come in anyway in Regulation 18/19, scoping and issues, is that right?
Well, it would be part of, it would be prior to Regulation 18 if we were to do one, yes.
But it's not compulsory.
Issues and scoping isn't compulsory, but we do have to conduct some form of early engagement. That would take the form of speaking with statutory consultees, local communities, that sort of stuff.
Thank you.
Councillor Walsh, if I can just add, it's referenced in paragraph 5.3 and 5.4. I would just say, given that we have a little extra time now for this local plan refresh, we have the opportunity to consider whether we may or may not want to conduct any additional consultations, including the issues and options scoping. So I think that will be taken under review. I'm not saying it will happen, but I'm not saying it won't. But I think we've got the opportunity to, you know, to have a look and see how we want to do this going forward. All right. Thank you. Right. No other comments on this item. In that case, page 71.2.1, the recommendation is that the proposed draft statement of community involvement is approved for consultation. Could I have a mover, Councillor Abbott? Oh, yes, with the change, thank you. And a seconder, please, somewhere. Councillor Holland, thank you. A show of hands, please, for agreement. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, moving on. Agenda item 8, call for sites 2024. Alan, you taking this one? Yeah.
I do have a presentation. If you just bear with me while I just
Oh, good.
share my screen.
Pictures.
Screen on. Apologies, members. I only got this laptop today. So. Hopefully, better than it was. Excellent. Right. So thank you very much, members. So as part of the review of the local plan, it's necessary for the council to. So as part of the review of the local plan, it's necessary for council to identify potential new sites to meet the development needs of the district. As such, the council issued a call for sites. What this basically does is the council contacts everybody who is on our database, so including agents, landowners, members of the public, who's expressed an interest in the local planning process, to see whether or not they have any sites that they would like to be considered considered for allocation. This call for sites took place for 6 weeks and concluded on the 24th of May. If a site is submitted, that doesn't mean it's going to be allocated, it just means it's a potential option for members to consider as a way of meeting our housing need, or housing or other needs. So it doesn't just, it's not just housing sites, there's also, you can put sites forward for employment, community uses, that sort of thing. So in total we had 319 sites put forward. If you applied a standard 25 dwellings to the hectare, you're probably looking at around about 130,000 houses. Thankfully we don't need to provide 130,000 houses in the districts. And other interesting statistics, it was about 8% of the entire district that has been submitted for consideration. So in terms of supply, we would para 3.6 does refer to the current standard methodology calculation figure of 7,093 between 2024 and 2041. So if the changes proposed to the standard methodology do go ahead, that could rise up to just over 10,000 for the same period. A number of parishes did not get any site submissions. They are listed at paragraph 3.3 of the report, but it should be noted that further sites could be submitted during later rounds of consultation. The council's current strategy, everyone should hopefully be familiar with this map, which is the current key diagram in the local plan. So the current strategy focuses growth the main towns, Braintree, Housestead and Witham, as indicated on the by the large red stars. Also along the A12 corridor, it should be noted by members that the sites we have had submitted would enable that strategy to continue through a review of the local plan. So we've also had sites submitted in key service villages, so there have been some larger submissions, such as potential submission for the redevelopment of the Colne Valley Golf Course in Elscombe, large sites at Hatfield Peveril. We've also had sites submitted in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 villages, However, it's more likely that they would receive limited growth in those locations, if any. All the sites are available on the Council's Call for Sites website, which is now live. So each site will need to be considered and assessed for its suitability, and a recommendation will be made to the local plan subcommittee as to whether or not to allocate a site. However, a decision will be necessary on what is the most appropriate strategy for delivering development across the whole district. So it's likely that the first meeting will be to discuss the current spatial strategy and any amendments to it, and whether or not we should be including things like larger scale sites, standalone options for large growth, that sort of thing. So the overall conclusion is that the Call for Sites has produced, in terms of just pure numbers, sufficient sites to potentially meet the 2024 to 2041 growth locations. I do have a few examples of the types of sites submitted. So these are just looking at the main towns of Braintree with Great Notley, Whittam and Halstead, and the key service villages. So just a quick look at Braintree first. It should be noted that you can obviously see that whilst this would be considered a extension or a large urban extension to Braintree, it actually sits mostly within Silverend and Cressing Ward and a bit in Stystead as well. We will find this with a lot of the larger towns, that any growth would have to be going into existing or adjacent parishes. This is the Bocking North Ward, so we've had some Dorwart there has been submitted again. We're not proposing to deallocate, or there's no evidence at this time to suggest that we'll be deallocating any existing strategic growth locations. So as you can see on this map, we still have the triangular Straits Mills site is most likely to continue to be allocated. This is the top of Bocking North Ward, so we have some potential sites around the High Garrett area as well. And not very much proposed in Bocking South Ward. There's a little, if your eyesight's good enough, there's a small site at the top right of the map next to the North Arrow that we will have to look at. But any site that is submitted, we will have to do a report on it, and that report will be considered by this panel. And again, there are some things where people have put sites forward. So this site is on Lakes Road at the top left. If you look down from where it says Becker's in the title, just down a little bit from that, you'll see a red hatch site. Currently proposed, is currently allocated for employment, but they want to look at potentially looking at that for housing. And those sorts of decisions will be informed by evidence on employment now within the district, that sort of thing. Again, Bocking, I've included this one. There's one site which is the former Angel Pub, that we would obviously give that due consideration. However, it does have rather a long site history, planning history of mostly refusal. So we will be looking at existing planning histories as well, and that will be feeding into the decision. And this one, west of Braintree, a few little blobs there. The large green area is our current defined green buffer between Braintree and Rain. And as part of our landscaping evidence base, we will be updating the settlement fringes for landscape, and we've also asked our consultants to look at the existing green buffers as well, just to make sure that they're appropriately drawn, or if we need to contract them a bit, expand them, or if we need new buffers anywhere else. So just take a quick look at Halstead, and this is sort of to the northwest of Halstead, so we have a little bit of growth proposed, or potential. Not proposed yet. Some sites have been put forward in this area, and Halstead is quite constrained at the moment, so I think it will be largely dependent on looking at the highways evidence base as to what, if anything, can go in that sort of a location. But this area here is a large strategic proposal to the northeast of Halstead, which actually follows roughly the line on the existing local plan map of a potential Halstead bypass. So that is one possible option that would be largely viability and highways evidence base dependent. And this is the southern part of Halstead here, showing that there could potentially be an extension around to the south as well. And just a little bit, there is a little connecting piece which is in the Collins ward adjacent to Bluebridge Industrial Estate, and just a few other little small areas that may would be consideration, would need proper consideration. Right, and I don't think we need to talk about that small one there. Witham, whilst it is a main town, it has rather limited proposals that have been put forward. So this is an area just to the north of Witham, so it's not actually within the curtilage of Witham, it's actually just within the ward. Limited options have been submitted within sort of the north, western areas of Witham. There's some areas down by Cutthroat Lane, I believe that's the car park to the right hand side of the screen, and a small area, I think that's just north of Blunts Hall Road, I believe. And some proposals just to the south of Witham, off the, I think that's the Malden Road there. These proposals here, I think will be subject to the development consent order for the A12. So I think that would potentially have some issues there. If you just look at the key service villages quickly, Coggeshall. Now these are the main or smaller, so the smaller proposals that have been put forward. So a few of these sites have previously been considered through the plan application process. And this is just to give you a slightly clearer idea of what was going on to the west. So that is a proposal to look at filling in that bypass area, although I think that again that would be highways dependent. And this is the area of sort of around Surrix, and this is the former part of the former site between Marks, Tay and Braintree, and Coggeshall, which was looking at garden community. We will have to have a meeting with Colchester just to see what's been submitted on their side of the border as well, because as it stands, you probably wouldn't want to look at allocating that because it's sort of slightly awkward looking proposal, but you know, we have to give all sides due consideration. And this one is a rather large proposal around the Patterswick area. This would be obviously a likely standalone garden community new town type proposal. I have to use the new terminology now. But again, there will be a lot of considerations. Yes, it would require an extensive evidence base all of its own. And I think the Earl's Cone, I think we can probably just stop at Earl's Cone. I think you've members have got a flavour of the sorts of size of sites we've got here, and with Earl's Cone we're looking at the golf courses have been submitted, and some areas to the west, and a few areas down towards the business park near Earl's Cone as well. But that's just to give members a general feel of what is going on. I'm just finally touch on Hatfield Peveril quickly as well. Obviously it is next to Witham, but there are some large proposals that are within Hatfield Peveril itself that have the potential perhaps to provide some infrastructure improvements. I know there is a desire for some sort of bypass of Malden Road by the Duke of Wellington to avoid the Duke of Wellington, and stuff like this could potentially help offer a solution to that if there was sort of support for that sort of development. I will stop there, and if there's any questions.
Thank you, Alan. That's, I think, very helpful and interesting. I know I'm not the only member who has had emails and phone calls from parish councils. I mean, I've had them from not just within mine and Councillor Courtaulds' ward, but had a phone call this afternoon from a parish councillor elsewhere in the district who'd been talking to a resident this morning who was really anxious about the number of sites for that ward put in. And I, will repeat myself again that this is very early on. Any landowner, developer can submit a call for sites. Doesn't mean it's going to finish up in the local plan. And if it does, there's still a planning process to go through. So I think it's just worth giving people that assurance that this is the starting gun, if you like. There's a long, long way to go. But I do understand that when people look at maps like that and see huge areas of red hatching, it causes some alarm. But there we go. Councillor Cunningham, I think you were first, then Councillor Ritchie.
Chairman, thank you very much for that, and Alan, thank you for your presentation and for the report, which I think very concisely and very clearly explains the situation where we are at this moment in time. And Chairman, I suppose where you took the words right out of my mouth by giving that reassurance. And I think that's the message we want to hope that our friends and our mates and our neighbours watching this or will be interested in the events of this committee. Just because there's red hatchings on Alan's maps does not necessarily mean ground will be muck will be shifted on those areas, and houses will definitely be built. I just want to ask a question about the duty to cooperate, if that's okay, please, with neighbouring authorities. Now, my understanding is, following the changes to the MPFF, I think there's more of a presumption and an encouragement and more of a compulsion to do that. I think in the past, we've always been very good with our duty of cooperation, and we border different counties, we border different local authorities, we have a lot of potential partners to cooperate with. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind just giving us a flavour, not only of what we have to do, but what we're actually doing and what we'll be likely to do in the weeks and months ahead as we go through this process, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Alan.
Yes, so duty to cooperate, I think is very much back on the menu. There were some proposals, I think, under the previous regime to sort of scale back on it. The new NPPF proposals are talking about actually making it a sort of legislative requirement to do the duty to cooperate. What Braintree Council does is we do meet regularly with local authorities on specific issues or just to have a general talk. And it's not just local authorities. We have, for example, met with, I think, Mid-Essex CCG. I think that's what they're called at the moment. They do like to change their name quite a lot. We've met with Chelmsford. We have meetings quite regularly with a higher tier authority, which is Essex County Council. And we are expecting some quite detailed comments from the County Council as part of our early engagement process. So we should hopefully have a lot of information on things like education, stuff like that, which will be very useful for our policies and our allocations. Members, when you look at the existing strategic policies, you'll notice there are references in there to providing two-form elementary schools, primary schools, that sort of thing. That sort of information is what we need from the County Council to help support our new developments. We also have Essex Planning Officers Association, which is a collection of officers from all our local authorities. They do get to meet regularly. We often commission evidence base together through that group. For example, we're waiting on a sort of gypsy transit gypsy study at the moment. Yes, it is a good forum for local authorities to get together and to talk about shared issues. But primarily, when you are doing a local plan, it is a good forum to talk to members, talk to other authorities. Sometimes you'll approach an authority and they don't want to talk to you, not out of rudeness or anything like that, but they don't think there's any particular issues. If they're not proposing anything on our boundary and we're not proposing anything on their boundary, then there's probably not a lot for you to talk about. All local authorities adjacent, including, funny enough, adjacent parish councils, you do write to through the consultation process. We do get responses quite regularly, particularly in Chelmsford, because we have quite a close relationship with them from in terms of like the Great Leas corridor, because Chelmsford's got quite a bit of growth going on down there, and they're often dependent on our secondary schools to help pupils who move into that area actually go to school. Yes, so we would generally have meetings with them. New NPPF is going to say that sort of more formalise that process, but we would have to produce a duty to cooperate statement when we submit our local plan as well, which would go to available public scrutiny and would go to in front of the planning inspectorate as well. So it's quite an important consideration that is only going to become more important as government's plans for the NPPF progress. So yes, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alan.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I echo what you started off saying about the perception that all of a sudden we're building thousands and thousands of houses across the district. I think that hasn't been helped by unhelpful social media postings that seem to incite a bit of an anti-development rhetoric, and unfortunately some of that by elected members, I'm afraid to say. I think it's really key and important that we do get that message out around. This is just the starting point. In fact, I was asked as far as London City Airport today by the CIO why we were planning to build over his favourite golf course. So I think there was a key message to get out there that this is actually just the starting point around us being able to refresh our local plan. And in fact, I'm really pleased that we've had this level of response and this amount of sites proposed, because to some extent it makes our task ahead easier. God forbid if we hadn't have had that many sites come forward, it would have really put us under pressure to get the sites into the plan ready for the approvals process. Also looking forward to, I think, the member development evening. I think there's an opportunity there for us to get some of these messages across that it can aid and assist some of our elected members in getting some of these key messages across and putting them in a stronger position to answer any emails or any inquiries from their ward members and allow them to be able to answer those responsibly. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. And yes, I agree, it is a good thing to have had the number of sites submitted that we have, because at least we have some choice available. Councillor Bowes-Flint, I had you down as next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When officers are liaising and talking to the NHS is what I'm interested in, perhaps we can ask the question of how on earth, you don't have to say that, you can say it in your own words, but how do they get to the figures that they get to when they are asked what contribution they would like on a planning application, because I've never been able to get to the bottom of it and I've never understood it. All I can say is just the little knowledge I have, the amount they ask for is very minimal considering the state that the NHS is in now. So can we just sort of, so that perhaps members can get a better understanding of what they're trying to achieve with little? Thank you.
I think Sarah wants to come in there, but just before she does, I absolutely agree. Those of us who sit on the planning committee never quite understood the small figures that come forward as part of Section 106 agreements. And I do remember we had, I think, a members' evening a while ago with a presentation from somebody from the NHS, and I actually came away more confused than I started. Yes, I agree. Sarah?
Yes, if I can help a little bit. The NHS have been hit by quite hard by some problematic appeal decisions and case law that has really challenged some of the contributions that they have asked for in the past. And so they haven't ever been particularly good, in my opinion, at mobilising themselves to ask for planning contributions. And when they did, they got really hit by the courts, which is really unfortunate. The approach they're now taking is to go for capital. So they generally have a formula where they ask for an amount based on how many residents would generate the need for an additional GP, and then they have capital costs for, say, an additional GP room on a particular site. So that's the approach they take. But we can certainly ask them, and I've done quite a lot of work in my previous role to support the NHS in asking better, putting a better quality submission forward for planning applications.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I partially am aware of what Sarah's just said. And I think I can say that I think the NHS are in a better place than they may have been 5 years ago on working with this. I think they realise they've missed the boat on a lot, but they've also been scared to because of law. But we need to, as members, we need to understand their logic and thinking of what they're asking for and what they're aiming for. And I understand that. And with the current situation of the local Mid-Essex, I think they would welcome any help that we could possibly give them at this present time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roswell. And I think, Sarah, any clarity that can be shed on this would be very welcome. Councillor Bowers, you next, and then Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just got a bit of a query in regards the tiers. Just looking at the numbers that we've got for Cressing within the report, on the actual wording, there's a part of second tier. There's this crazy thing. We've got second tier. We've got Ty Green, which is a small part of Cressing, and second tier. But then we've got Cressing in the third tier. And so, from what we've got on the tables of the sites, and I just wanted to get some understanding, because on the wording on second tier, it references that sites submitted in Cressing are often adjacent to the boundary of Braintree and will be considered extensions to Braintree rather than extensions to that parish. Tell us about it. But then in the table, we've got Ty Green saying 432. That's in the second tier, which my understanding of Ty Green is that's the bit that hasn't got the train station, so I'm not sure why that's in the second tier. But then in the third tier, we've got Cressing, that's listing 2,449. But then in the major applications, so literally if we're adding the 2,449 plus the 432, but the ones actually in the strategic sites, is that on top of it? So there's like about another sort of north of 9,000 we're told earlier on in the report. So I'm like, just using Cressing as an example, I just want to make sure this report is as transparent as it is possible for people to understand. So I guess there's two questions there. Is there any reason why Cressing is a second tier and a third tier village? And are we splitting the two parts of Cressing, the small part of Ty Green and the main part of the village? But then also, which numbers are relevant for Cressing in that? Like, are the strategic sites included in that, or is there not? Because obviously this is more than multiplying the size of Cressing, which is done already. But I just wanted to get an understanding, and I'm conscious these are just sites that have been put forward and nothing's been agreed and all that kind of thing. We need to be clear on that. But I was just trying to get an understanding as Cressing is an example within the report, so I can understand what I'm actually looking at.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Alan, yeah.
I'm happy to answer that. So what we've tried to do is make so when we put a village in, we're not talking about a parish area. We're talking about individual areas, villages within a parish. So Cressing would be a separate, different, as you say, correctly say, it's identified as a different tier village to the Ty Green part of Cressing village. But the Cressing one, that is adjacent to the strategic growth location. So that actually, I think it goes up and actually touches Cressing. It's the village itself. The overall strategic extent to the southeast of Braintree, I think, can probably accommodate upwards in the region of about 10,000. But what we try to do in the report, and it may not have come across as clearly as it should have done, but we were trying to differentiate between small, medium, large, and strategic levels of growth. So I take your point there that it could be perceived that there's something a little bit hidden there. But Cressing, my understanding is that 2,000 plus figure would include part of the strategic growth for Braintree, for a potential extension to Braintree if that were to take place. But Cressing Ty is generally considered to be well connected to Braintree. Planning inspectors have annoyingly ruled against us on several occasions within the village. So I think it's something that they view as a positive. Its location, access to services within Braintree. And I think we could all argue about the reliability of getting to the train station and the actual trains once you get there. So, but it does provide an opportunity to go further afield. So that is primarily why Cressing is considered a little bit higher up. If we take, for example, Silver End, that was previously key service villages, but was downgraded, I think primarily due to its access issues and things like that. But I think Cressing is still dependent on Silver End for GP services, I believe, or is it the other way around, or one of the other ways?
No. Some people in Cressing can use Silver End, but mostly they use Braintree.
They mostly use Braintree, yeah. So, yes, there is that sort of consideration as to what services are available, because we do say it is whether the level of how you can support your day-to-day need determines where you are, or where a village is within the tier system we have in the local plans.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think I understand what you said, Alan. I also think, and I appreciate this is just a first effort report sort of thing, but I think going forward, especially when we come to look at the specific site allocation and so on, I think anything we can do to make it clear which, villages, parishes, whatever we're talking about, and the differences and their relation to strategic sites and the towns is helpful, because I can see where the confusion has arisen. Okay, all right. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yeah, just briefly, firstly, to clarify that point, it's absolutely right that a lot of people in Cressing will use Braintree GP services, but for planning purposes, the applications in Cressing come up, contribution goes to Silver End. Yeah. And by the way, we've had no improvement to Silver End surgery. We're still waiting. Hundreds of thousands of pounds sitting in Section 106, nothing has happened. Back in the spring, I made the comment when this process was kicked off that this process would frighten a lot of people and alarm a lot of people, and it was both inevitable it would, but I also think I disagree with the comment that it's great we've got so many sites. I think what it does is it actually reflects on the fact that landowners, most of these are farmers, would rather build houses on it or solar farms or commercial parks or have quarrying than actually farm and produce food. And I think that's quite an issue for this country, because the amount of food we're producing in this country that we require is going down as a percentage, and this only just accelerates that. So that's a sort of general comment. I think the other thing that frightens people and communities is that, particularly in those areas where we have already had in recent years a lot of development, they are subjected to a lot of noise, dust, tipper lorries going backwards and forwards all the time, huge potholes in the road exacerbated by those vehicles. And so they're worried about their living conditions, their quality of life, if their community has another round of major development. And then on top of that, there's this issue we've just discussed about services. Will these villages actually get any meaningful upgrade in services to support these hundreds, in Silver End and Cressing's cases, thousands of new residents coming in? So there's a lot of issues there. I know the members of the administration keep using this word refresh. It's obviously their corporate intention to make it sound like a refresh. 2 press releases went out with that intention. Come on, 10,000 extra houses, and that's my back of the envelope calculation, was between 7 and 10, and officers have confirmed that, is not a refresh. The current local plan's got 14,000 in it. 10,000 is almost the same again. It's a huge amount of development. It is thousands of houses being built in the countryside, whether we like it or not. I'm not debating here what the government's telling us we've got to do or the fact we need to build houses, but this is not a refresh of the local plan. It is another round of major sites and development coming up. And by the way, if members have read the report, it also says that this is not the end of the sites that can be submitted. More sites can be submitted during the process. So we could see even more. I've got 2 questions, if I may, Madam Chairman. One relates to the discussion just now, because I'm not clear on this. So when we do get the revised timetable and parishes want to come along and speak about sites within their parish, how, for example, will Stystead and Cressing, I think it's this, I'm very interested in, and I'll come to that in a minute, why this is coming up, this site a lot. How will they be treated? Because are they coming along to speak at the meeting where we're discussing the villages, or are they coming along to speak at the meeting, when they want to make a comment, when the strategic sites come up, or both? And on that, can I ask, it's quite a pointed question, but I think it's a relevant one, and I ask also on behalf of residents, because I was at Cressing Parish Council meeting last night where residents asked this very question. The commentary in text at the bottom of page 114, paragraph 311, about this site, which went on the display just now, why is that wording treatment not applied to all the other potential strategic sites? It talks in some detail about the number of homes, hectares of employment. Well, we don't have to allocate it all. We could allocate some of it. Strategic growth location. Is some leaning already going towards that site, or am I completely misreading that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll come to officers in a second. I mean, some of the points you make, okay, fine, obviously we're quite free to make those comments tonight, but they are matters which will be discussed in detail when we come to look when this committee comes to look at the specific site allocations, you know, around infrastructure and who has or hasn't got what. This report tonight is just my understanding anyway, it's just a starting point, a demonstration of the sort of sites that we've had. And actually, I stand by my comment that it's great that we've had so many. If we hadn't, I think we'd be in a very sticky position, because this new government has made it really clear that they expect all local authorities to get on and build. They expect all local authorities to have a plan either in place or at the very least late stage by December 2026. So if we don't have enough sites coming in, then we have to go out for a call for sites again, because we are not, is my understanding, going to be able to get away with, you know, not meeting the housing target.
That's what I said.
Well, yes, so I think it is a good thing that we have at least got a significant number of sites coming in. It does not mean, and you know this, Councillor Abbott, and I've said this, it doesn't mean that they actually go into the local plan. And I do think refresh is absolutely fine. It's not a new plan from the ground up. The refresh is the overall term for it. What comes forward, and we've had everything, I think, from somebody wanting to put one house in a field somewhere to some significantly large sites with thousands of homes and everything in between. That is people's right to put that in, but it's then up to us, this administration, this authority, to decide where and how we want to see that development. Anyway, and I'll go over to Alan, particularly on the point with people being able to speak at the meetings and how that's going to be handled.
Okay, so I just want to say that we are still in the evidence-based gathering phase of the local plan. Any recommendations made by officers will have to be based on that evidence base, and it will ultimately be up to members to decide what sites are appropriate to develop. We only mentioned a bit about part allocation just to make members aware that if a large site does come forward, then it's perfectly within their remit to allocate a smaller portion of that site, and that can apply anywhere across the district, or to any site across anywhere in the district. When it comes to looking at the specific site allocations, once we've had a look at the local plan timetable, we will obviously try our best to make sure that items that go to those meetings are most appropriate for that level of consideration. So I expect we would try our best to get sites in Braintree considered at the same time as sites in Gressing. I think that would be the most appropriate way to do it. Yeah, just to say that we've not made any kind of decision, or from officers' point of view, we have no recommendations in mind at this time. We will start putting those recommendations forward as soon as we've got the evidence base that is, you know, sufficiently robust and credible to make those decisions, make those recommendations to members.
Thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I take your comments earlier on that why communities might see this as alarming, and it's caveated, and not all these proposals will go ahead. But speaking not as a member of any party, and I know some people struggle with that term, and yet they're now using terms like municipal socialism. I was never accused of being a socialist in the Labour Party. But what I want to say is not a political point. It's genuinely looking at this from a planning viewpoint. Step back and look at this strategically for a minute, not just these call for sites. What proposals have we been affected in our district over recent years? The incinerator at Rivenhall, we've heard in the last few days, it's going to take all the black bin waste. There was the garden communities, which I'm not going to comment on. We know what the decision was. We have new proposals, the Essex Minerals Plan, where I think Braintree District made very strong and robust comments on a very non-partisan basis on this committee. The pylons proposal, the Environment Agency told me directly, I'm not making this up, Sam Hooley of the Environment Agency told me they have a 100-year minerals option agreement with the Church of England, Blackwater Aggregates and the Environment Agency, which I thought was a quasi-independent public body. And so therefore, one can understand, I think. So I'm not commenting even on the call for sites process, but you can see why there might be concern within communities. These are almost silo proposals coming from different agencies. Is anybody looking at the cumulative effect? I do have a question, and I hope that came across as non-partisan. It's as a former member of the Institute, I say that. And I looked at the page 118 and page 119, and I know this is no commitment. These are proposals. Stystead has got a figure for 6589. Well, I lived in Stystead for a few months. That would be quite an expansion of Stystead. And Pattiswick and the other named areas on page 119, there's a figure of 21,667. I'm not commenting on that per se, although they seem rather not exactly proportionate figures. But my question is, finally, what about criteria and weighting? And will the overall total, when will we know that, by which the council, our council, my council decides on these? And will the overall total, presumably, it'll have to be controlled back to the combined total, and I think it was mentioned earlier this evening, of approximately 10,000 extra houses. Am I being clear?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, some very, very large sites have been submitted, and the numbers, I can understand, I don't disagree with you at all, that the numbers look alarming for many residents, particularly those in the smaller villages who look at these numbers, but the devil will be in the detail, and it will be up to the local plan subcommittee to look at those when they come forward and decide whether or not we want them to go forward into our local plan. You know, this is, I say again, this is just a starting point, and anybody can put sites in any time. It doesn't actually have to have been a call for site as part of a refreshed local plan. Anybody could have come forward with this any time. You know, we will examine them, debate on them, and if they do finish up some of them in the local plan, there is still a planning process to go through. But I agree, we do need to keep reassuring parish councils and residents that this doesn't mean that we are going to be building over the whole of Braintree district. Alan, would you like to come in,
If
please?
I can, I'll just talk about the cumulative impact point. I did mention earlier when we were talking about Witham that the DCO for the A12 would obviously influence or potentially influence where sites could be appropriate. The local plan, when we allocate sites, we have to prove that that site is deliverable and developable. We would certainly have to take into consideration proposals such as the Norwich to Tilbury power line. We wouldn't be able to propose a site allocation that could potentially not come forward because of that route, where they would require rather a large buffer zone around them for those to come forward. Other considerations, air quality is quite a big consideration. So you wouldn't want to propose a site and then all of a sudden it's next to a new A12 or it's next to an incinerator, because that could have significant implications for air quality of residents, which could potentially reduce the amount of development that a site could deliver, and that could therefore compromise the overall delivery of your local plan. So we will have to look at all these things, and members would have to make some decisions taking all those factors into account. I mean, they certainly wouldn't be looking at a site in isolation, and we will certainly, particularly with our highways evidence base, that is an assessment of virtually the highway network for the vast majority of the district will need to be assessed for our development proposals impact, and it's just something we will go to, and we'll provide members with as much evidence as we can to enable them to make the best decisions possible.
Thank you.
One very
Yes,
quick one,
yeah.
purely a clarification. We will have criteria, we'll know the weighting, and then the individual sites, the total will have to be not greater than what Braintree, what we decide as the total number of new houses, presumably.
If I may, with the new MPPF, they are strengthening up on the standard methodology. The current MPPF has slightly weaker wording on it, suggesting that it is a starting point, whereas the newer MPPF looks like this is likely to be your target, and we would have great difficulty in arguing that target down. We will obviously be producing a SHMAR, a strategic housing market assessment as well, which would factor, or which would look at the overall target to help to see whether or not that is appropriate. But I would not expect, if the MPPF were to go through as currently is, I would be very surprised if there was anything there that would say you could reduce your figure significantly, if at all. But we would have to see what the final MPPF draft comes out with.
Thank you, Alan. And I think, Councillor Walsh, that's, it's an important point. When these sites come forward for consideration by this subcommittee, it will come with professional advice from planning officers as to their suitability, what infrastructure might be needed. There'll be a lot of information, plus there will be the evidence-based documents by then. We will also, I assume, have had a more firmed up housing number from the government, and there'll be MPPF information, so there will be a lot to consider before we even make a decision. All right. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we've had a very good conversation about this tonight, and I just want to say a couple of things, if I may. I'm just over a week away from my 40th birthday, and apart from slightly complicated labour, I think, meaning I was born in Chelmsford and I rocked up at WJC Hospital in Braintree a couple of days later. I would pretty much say I was Braintree born and bred. And I reflect on some of the things that Councillor Abbott says, and I have a certain degree of sympathy. And I think it's important we share that with our friends and neighbours who are watching and taking interest in this process this evening. We know that some of these options, when he refers to farmers and landowners, I think some of these land options have probably been part of the strategic planning discussions at Braintree beyond 40 years. I don't know why I'm looking at Lynette. I'm sorry, when anything's measured in decades, I always look in Councillor Splint direction. But she won't mind, but I think she would agree that some of the land options here have been in place for decades, and I'm afraid it is such is the nature of the Braintree district over that period of time that lots of people have wanted to come and live here for a number of reasons. Isn't that right, Leader? And dare I say, perhaps far more recently, isn't that right, Councillor Walsh? It's a very popular part of the world to live, and therefore development has taken place here, and the area has grown immeasurably in those decades. And I can totally sympathise with the points that Councillor Abbott made about the effects of building, noise, construction. I grew up on a little country lane outside Braintree called Queenborough Lane, and I lived what is you'd say now, the Black Notley side of it, so the side of the A131, which bypass, which appeared in 1996. A little bit further down Queenborough Lane is the Braintree bypass that appeared, I think it was the year I started school, 1989. I remember that. And I can remember when Panner's Farm wasn't a hamlet as part of a garden community, it was actually a farm. And so, yes, I think I can empathise and experience, I can sympathise with those who have had the impact of development. But of course, what is there now is Great Notley Garden Village that took about 8-9 years to build out. And we still hold as an example of how development can be done well and bringing tremendous benefits to the community. Not just to the community, the new community, but to the existing communities as well. So what I do is, and I appreciate the concerns and this question, is this a refresh, is this a new local plan? I ask in a totally non-partisan way, what would be the alternative? Is the alternative to take on the message that is sometimes passed to other local authority and other districts, some even in this county, that the best thing you can possibly do is to totally give up that assurance that a local plan, a sound local plan gives, rip it up and hand over this long-term strategic planning process straight to the developers. Madam Chairman, you very kindly indulged me by having a little bit of a rant about developers, and that is the problems we have with developers when we have the framework in place. Madam Chairman, if we didn't have that framework in place, or we didn't have that opportunity to give that greater resilience to our friends and neighbours in our communities, what would the alternative be? And I think I'd like to hear some thoughts from others as to what that alternative would be. Because unless there is a viable alternative, I still think this is by far the most responsible way to respond to a changing landscape in terms of national planning policy to support our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Butland was next actually, and then Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we have to be realistic. And as we move forward on this local plan, it has to be as the world is, not as we might like it. So we might like farmers to be growing more food, but actually many of them want to give up their land for other things. We have a democratically elected government that is committed to building 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. Now, I've got some concerns about whether that logistically will be possible in terms of the supply chain, etc., but they will want to get there. And they have been democratically elected. Now, that does mean, and we've seen already, that for places like Braintree, our target is going to be higher than perhaps we would have liked. I think maybe all of us would not quite like that much, although we do recognise, and we have to recognise, that migration is taking place. I'm not talking about across the Channel, I'm talking from out from London, as people have moved out. One only has to look at the impact that COVID had when people suddenly discovered that they didn't have to travel into London every day of the week. And therefore it was possible to buy a house, to live in Kelvedon and maybe go in one day a week. And of course they were selling houses in London at a very much greater amount of money than they were needing to buy property in Kelvedon. Now that's the market. It's got to be realistic. These highbrow things about, well, wouldn't it be nice if this, that or the other? We have to be realistic about what the situation is. Now, I think through you, Madam Chairman, Alan, you said the total number of, if we added up all the numbers, it was something like 100,000? 130,000. Let's just take the high tier of what we might have to find, 10,000. So what we're saying is that 1 in 13 of these proposals would be what is needed. And as elected members, if we want to start actually counteracting the quite understandable concerns of residents, we need to be showing that, yes, we've got all these red figures. Some of them are more in hope than in anything else, but only 1 in 13 will be needed at the end of the day of the figures that are there at the moment. I know we will have more discussions on those figures as they come about. We can't just keep saying what we're against. We actually have to start saying how we are going to deal with what an elected government has every right to be able to say should be the housing target. And I hope that throughout this process, that will be to the forefront of our minds. What is needed? Now, we want to make the best job of that, and we will make the best job of that if we approach it in a sensible, grown-up, adult approach. Dealing with the world as it is, not the world as we would like. And that's going to be a challenge for all of us. I hate to quote the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who says, difficult decisions have to be made. We will have to make difficult decisions. And I hope, for example, that we might persuade the government to put more pressure on developers who hold consents and then don't move forward. I mean, I would hope that there would be complete unanimity across this chamber on that, because at the moment, and this is where I am disappointed with the government, in that a meeting was held with the top 10 building developers in this country, not with local authorities in the first place. And if this doesn't happen, I've got a pretty good idea who's going to get the finger of blame from government. And it will be us as local authorities. And we've got to make sure that as we approach this, and you know, bear in mind, we're not the only one. I understand there are other authorities within Essex who are having to relook at their I think our colleagues across in Uttlesford. My understanding is that Chelmsford, which has been working 2 years, are having to relook at theirs. And some of our colleagues in the south, and Councillor Beavis will know more than this, you know, Castle Point, which I think she's been advising, you know, huge increases there. But I think we are well placed. I mean, I think the fact that we started sooner than most is great, if only for making sure that we could get consultants, because they're going to be having a heyday, aren't they? Because every local authority is going to want consultants in to advise them on this, that and the other. So starting, as we decided in March to do, I think was a very, very good decision that we took. But I make this plea to members. You may well have to tell your own constituents that actually some development is going to have to take place. But the right type of housing, in the right place, and with infrastructure. But we know that 2 houses at the end of a road isn't going to bring you much infrastructure. So we will have to balance between the size of developments and what infrastructure will come. And this will test elected members as to how they can deal with these issues. The local plan, the refresh of the local plan is never going to be easy. And I will work, personally, I will work collegiately with anyone who is coming forward with ideas as to how we achieve it. I will not spend time wasted on people who only oppose everything. And I just hope that we will take it forward. This, you know, we are going to have pressure. This is a key point for this government. I, you know, would rather this government wasn't elected. But I am a Democrat who believes that, you know, directly elected governments have the opportunity, have the right to put forward their proposals. And I just hope that we will be seen by central government as an authority that is actually trying to do it. I also want to see a lot more emphasis upon what actually is affordable housing, and also about housing for rent, because those are 2 areas in this district which I think we seriously need to give attention to. So I don't want to see 10,000 4- and 5-bedroom houses, you know, for just so that more people who can afford that can come out. I want to see a good selection of affordable and also houses to rent, because you know, when you think of, and I mean, I'm sure all members in the room tonight will know of either directly related families or neighbours or what, where we have people in their late 20s and 30s still living, sofa surfing in effect, with their parents because they're not able to afford houses. Now, well, I could be his dad, of course, Tom Cunningham's father, but you know, it was naturally assumed in the... I'm not, please, God forbid I am not. But, you know, when I was you know, 25, or I forget now, mid-1970s, it was naturally assumed that you would get a house. That might have been what we used to call council housing, or people would buy a house. But the opportunity was there. And at the moment, we are failing our young people with the current system. And I don't want to add this council to the list of failing organisations. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. I think that was a really excellent summing up of the reality of the situation. And it's true, we are going to be given, we've been given a higher housing target, which we're going to have to meet. There is absolutely no point in pretending that we can avoid it, because the government have made it very clear that where they see a local authority not trying to make a target, not trying hard enough, they will intervene and take over the planning decision process. Now, that has happened to some of our colleagues and authorities not a million miles away from here, and we don't want that to happen to us. So yes, we do need to be realistic. The point made about developers is extremely good. We have significant sites in this district which the planning committee gave permission to, where we have not seen a spade in the ground. That is extremely unhelpful, and I would really welcome the day when a government, any government, actually decides to do something about that. I've got Councillor Abbott and then Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Listening to the administration members at this meeting and many others, it reminds me of being at school when we were naughty at the back of the class and were being told off and lectured all the time about how we should behave. It's just endless. It gets so tiresome, as my grandmother said. Going on about objecting to this and objecting to that and what's the alternative. I'll say it very, very clearly. We don't have a choice. This authority, like all others, is going to have to provide what the government requires us to provide. And in fact, the ministers have already said it's not about arguing about the numbers, it's arguing that you'll be given the number and you've got to find the sites. So there's not even a debate. So flying kites about what's the alternative from Councillor Cunningham, there isn't one. I don't know what you're talking about. All you're trying to do as ever, you lot, is to try and sort of put pressure on the opposition. Now, don't forget what happened last time. And this is what I'm seriously saying we should avoid it. Last time when we had the Part 1 local plan, it was a disaster. It led to the local plan being delayed for years, which resulted in many sites being granted on appeal. It cost this council over £1 million of wasted costs, and it upset a lot of communities. Now, the leader of the council, who's just sitting on this committee, said recently in a newspaper article that he might upset the same people that he upset last time in pursuing so-called garden communities, new towns. Now, I want to avoid that, absolutely. But it would be helpful if we stopped being talked down to all the time. And if you talk about development and telling your local communities difficult issues, in the rural ward that I represent alongside Councillor Wright, which represents largely 3 villages and some hamlets, we're looking at the best part of 2,000 houses already being built with planning or coming up for planning. 2,000 houses in one rural ward. And then you make comments about, well, we've got to tell our communities difficult decisions have to be made when we're looking at these seas of red ink. So it's not an argument about the numbers. We know we're going to have to provide those sites. So let's leave that one behind. It's about where they are, but please stop talking down to us.
I haven't heard anyone being talked down to this evening, Councillor Abbott. I've heard some very realistic comments and remarks. I haven't heard anyone being talked down to. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ask a couple of questions, hopefully short ones. First of all, we've got lots of sites that have been put forward. Could this district council decide to allocate an area of land which was included but predominantly ran outside a proposed site? So, for example, this council might, I'm suggesting, decide that there are 2 parcels of land, but in actual fact, strategically, it makes much more sense to develop them together along with the parcel in between. So the first question is that sort of thing doable? And the second question is, and you won't be surprised at this, I don't suppose, will later site proposals include sites for energy infrastructure, given the fact that in the rural areas, We've now got new and very large-scale demands for land usage, including delivering off-site BNG, most importantly nature recovery, and also, of course, large areas for solar, which we know about and the connection agreements already exist for. So the question is, will, later in the process, sites be allocated for energy industry use?
Thank you, Councillor Holland. I'll get officers to respond for that. Just on that last point, I think we've had a fairly clear message from the government that energy sites, solar, wind farms, so on, they are pushing very strongly for that. So, yeah, but Alan, would you like to reply?
Yeah, I can comment on that. So, if a site is proposed and is not necessarily appropriate, but a non-proposed site is put forward, we would have to prove that site was deliverable and developable. So, if members fancied a site, then it would be up to officers, I think, to approach that landowner and to find out what their intentions were for that site in future. I'm sure if we were to do that, they might get very excited, and I think we would probably be able to do something with it, subject to other legal constraints, things like that. There isn't a specific target for energy that I'm aware of. However, the Call for Sites has had a rather large proposal for, I believe it's solar, sort of to the north of Finchingfield, near Cornish Hall End, Stanbourne Way. We will, of course, have to give that due consideration for that for the proposed use there, and we will also have to be working on a renewable energies document as well, which will be looking at potentially appropriate places for renewable energy in the district. So that's something we will have to give consideration through the local plan process.
Thank you, Alan. It's helpful, I think. Any other comments? I think we've had a very good discussion on this paper, members. So the recommendations on page 113 is that the contents of this report are noted. Given its importance, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder, and then a show of hands, please. Could I have a mover? Councillor Bowles-Flint, thank you. Councillor Ritchie, second, and a show of hands that this has been noted. Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Right, we move on to item 9, which is National Planning Policy Framework, verbal report. Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. So this is about the proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. This was announced on the 30th of July. So it's out to consultation, which runs until the 24th of September. So the key headlines from this consultation are as follows. For housing, mandatory housing targets are proposed to return, which would be calculated using a new standard method. The proposed housing target would increase from the existing local plan target of 716 to 1,098 homes per year. In addition, the requirement for 5-year land supply in all circumstances is proposed to return, together with the 5% buffer being restored. Given the stage of the local plan review, the council will need to follow the 1,098 figure if it is confirmed. For affordable housing, there's an explicit reference to consider social rent, the removal of 10% affordable home ownership, and the 25% first homes requirement in affordable housing is also proposed to be removed. First homes would become restricted to exception sites or developer contributions. And there's a focus on mixed tenures to accelerate delivery, as well as questions posed around the small site requirement in plan making. The consultation also poses questions around the most appropriate way to promote high percentage social rent affordable housing developments, whilst also querying safeguards that may be necessary to avoid unintended consequences. And finally, for affordable housing, respondents are asked what measures might better support and increase rural affordable housing. For plan making, as has already been said, the deadline for submission of new local plans is proposed to be extended from June 25 to December 2026. For strategic planning, the duty to cooperate with neighbouring authorities is to continue. There'll be a need for consistency between authorities on the delivery of major infrastructure. And there's also a promise of effective new mechanisms for cross-boundary strategic planning, with further detail promised in forthcoming legislation. In addition, there's potential for amendments to the test of soundness to better assess strategic scale plans or proposals. For commercial development, the revised NPPF is proposed to state appropriate sites for commercial development which meets the needs of a modern economy should be identified, including suitable locations for uses such as laboratories, gigafactories, data centres, digital infrastructure, freight and logistics. And for decision making, similar changes are proposed which would come into effect immediately when the new NPPF is announced. For public infrastructure, education is proposed to be expanded to include sufficient choice of early years and post-16 places. In addition, significant weight is proposed to be placed on the importance of new, expanded or upgraded public service infrastructure when considering proposals for development. For transport, there's reference to a vision-led approach to transport planning, challenging what is stated to be an outdated default assumption that new development will automatically generate traffic growth. The proposed wording in the NPPF will make a refusal of permission on highways grounds even more difficult than it is currently. For climate change, firmer wording is proposed which requires plans to identify suitable areas for renewable and low carbon energy sources and supporting infrastructure where this would help secure the development. And for decision making, local planning authorities should support planning applications for all forms of renewable and low carbon development. Significant weight will need to be given to any development site contribution to renewable energy generation and a net zero future. In terms of design, the government proposes to reverse the changes to require beauty. Rather the revised NPPF will focus on well-designed places. The revised document encourages densities in urban areas through upwards extensions, with the previous caveats around character, local character, proposed to be removed. Brownfield development will be acceptable in principle, and there'll be a focus on design codes to support areas rather achieving greater density development, in particular larger new communities, rather than the previous mandatory district-wide design codes. In terms of decision making, the presumption in favour of development within paragraph 11 of the NPPF, which is a paragraph I think is known very well to those who make design planning applications, this is proposed to be amended to explicitly reference location, design and affordable housing as factors which may be positive if a 5-year land supply is not agreed by an inspector. So there's a slight tightening of criteria proposed for that paragraph. Finally, the consultation asks for views on other changes in addition to those proposed with it that you'd expect within a new version of the NPPF. So this includes questions on development management fees, changes to the national, the NSIP regime, the nationally significant infrastructure projects, and that's likely to mean that more applications can be directed through the NSIP process, the DCO process. And officers are, just to reassure, officers are working with Councillor Spray as the Cabinet Member for Planning to consider the proposed changes, and we will provide a full report containing recommended responses for the NPPF consultation to the 16th of September Local Plan Subcommittee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. A really good, clear sort of bullet point summing up of some of the things that we are going to have to consider. I think there are some things in there which many of us would welcome and some things which cause some concern. The idea that it's going to be even harder to challenge refusal and so on highways grounds is a bit alarming, but there we go. Any comment? Councillor Abbott.
Yeah, just very briefly, I agree. Thank you, excellent summary. Yes, a potpourri really. There's some good stuff in there and some worrying stuff. Social housing emphasis good, renewables generally good depending on site. I think increased densities in urban areas is we've got to look at that, because otherwise we are going to be chewing up so much countryside. The traffic one is unbelievable really. I mean, if you look at places like Whitton now, peak time every single working day, it's virtually stationary. The fact we're not going to be able to more difficult to comment on traffic. But I do have a question. The new target, what's the trigger for that when we do the calculations of number? Is that from the date of publication? I should know this. I should have read it, but I haven't. Or is it in the future, or is it in the past?
It's from the date that the NPPF is adopted.
Okay, Councillor Walsh.
Very, very briefly, thanks for that tremendous summary. so we will get a report about the implications of the new MPPF for us. Will Braintree be submitting comments as part of this consultation, so proactively as well?
Yes, the report on the 16th of September will provide draft responses for the local plan subcommittee that will then ultimately be submitted to the government, yeah.
Right. Anyone else? Any questions? Right. No? All right. Thank you, members. Thank you again, Sarah, for that. That brings us to the end of agenda items. We have no urgent business either in public or private session this evening. I think this has been a really good meeting. Lots and lots of work ahead for all of us. So I hope we're up for the challenge of that. But thank you for tonight. Thank you to officers for their presentation and support. And I will close the meeting at 9:20. Thank you.